My Uncle Carmi just deceased last week, and we will be burying him tomorrow. Ironically, my dad, who is 94, my uncle being 96, my dad passed away on January 20th. To know the two of these men is just incredible because they both had such wonderful lives. They were just the greatest men that you could ever imagine. I guess from a very young age, their mother instilled in them that being proper and being gentlemen was an important thing. And throughout their lives, they carried that through. Very family-oriented men, both of them. Both were veterans. One served in the Korean War, my Uncle Carmi, and my dad served in World War II. Men to be so proud of, and the fact that they were so closely entwined. Their hands were always touching whenever they sat together. Most recently, when my dad was in assisted living before he passed. My Uncle Carmi, it must have been just so difficult for him once he lost my dad that you know, he got sick very shortly thereafter. It was only 19 days. So buried right over here at the Wollaston Cemetery, Mount Wollaston Cemetery. And I guess my dad one day was at her grave. He was still driving at the time, which he shouldn't have been, but he was driving and said, "It's close to home, so I'll be okay." And I guess he tripped and fell at the grave, and there was a really nice girl standing, you know, respecting her grandmother, and she saw my dad fall. Well, she was a nurse, and she immediately went over to my dad and said, "I'm a nurse, I'll call an ambulance, you know, if there's anything that I can do for you." And my dad was so grateful to her. He said, no, I'm fine, and they made sure he was okay. And the girl left. He had no idea who this girl was, but went over a few weeks later to the grandmother's gravesite to find this girl's name out, and somehow at 94, he could not see well, could not hear well, he found the grandmother, one of the family members' phone numbers, called this girl and sent her a gift certificate to say thank you to her. And my Uncle Carmi was the same way. That's just the way these men were. After that, my dad had to go into South Shore Hospital, and this girl happened to be a nurse on the floor that he was in, and immediately she saw the name Della, Barba, immediately went over and said, said thank you so much. I'm the girl that, that helped you out that day at the cemetery.
I want to tell you about my father. His name was Camillo, but he went by the name of Carmi. Everybody knew him as Carmi or Della. And he was always willing to help anybody and everybody, whether he knew you or not. If he knew you needed something, he would be there, the first one to help you. Wonderful smile, bubbling personality, and was always about family and friends. All the brothers were fortunate that they all lived about a block away from each other, and so nobody could go by anybody's house without stopping, beeping the horn or something to check on each other, just to say hey. Their mother died when they were relatively young, 12, 14, 16 years of age, and so they became, extremely close at that point and always looked after each other. And they would have conversations in Italian to each other, which was always amusing because they would go in and out of English, and I was always amazed at that ability that they had, and they always spoke so highly of their mother. My father took his little brother Arthur to get a tattoo shortly after his mother died, and they had the exact same tattoo, and it said, "In loving memory of my mother," and it was a cross with roses across it. But they both later on kind of regretted it, because they thought tattoos probably wasn't the best way to remember their mother. So, and my father got in a lot of trouble when he came home, and he and his little brother had tattoos. My grandfather was not pleased. Because our parents were also close and continued to live close together, their family was their friends. And so we grew up with that. I mean, they always get together on Friday nights. We had the family tradition of always going down to Wareham to my Uncle Arthur's place every Sunday in the warm weather. For everybody would be there, 35, 40 of us. We had our rituals. My father would take the children at dusk frogging, and they would go out catching frogs, and everybody was waiting for Uncle Camillo to do that. And it brings a smile to everybody's face when they talk about it. And so a couple years ago, I started a tradition of family and friends, and we do it the Saturday after Thanksgiving because people tend to be around, during the holiday. And the very first, what made me do it was we did my father's 90th birthday on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and it was so wonderful to see everybody celebrating something versus going to a wake or a funeral. And so then we started the tradition, and everybody comes. It's not always the same people, but it gives you a chance to stay in touch with each other, and I think that's important. I think that's what our parents would want.